Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon back.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Welcome to the Hall of Honor induction ceremony. My name is Dr. N.L. Alston, and I am proud and privileged to serve as the superintendent of schools here at Hamilton Central School. It is a fine day here in Central New York, particularly in Hamilton. While I welcome you, I'd like to also take a moment to publicly thank the following two committees that have worked tirelessly to make today happen. I'd like to take a moment to first publicly thank the All-Class Reunion Committee. And if you are here, would you stand? Anyone? That's fine. That's okay. Everyone who is on the Hall of Honor Committee, would you please stand? Aha. Without the work that goes on behind the scenes, without the meetings and the planning, today just would not happen. And today is important because it says something about our values as a community when we recognize people who have given back and who are successful. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize Board of Education Trustee Ms. Terry Monty. Would you please just be recognized for your volunteer service? So that the hallmark of a quality, top-flight community is the level of and quality of community service. And finally, I would like to thank the Emerald Foundation. If you notice outside in the hallway, there was a fine young lady sitting at the table with Emerald Foundation information. The Emerald Foundation supports projects, teachers, students here at Hamilton to support programs that we would not necessarily be able to afford through our budget. So I wanted to just make that really clear. There's information outside if you're interested, and now we'll get into our business for today. Today we are going to recognize 3 people who have done outstanding work. And not only am I proud to be on stage with them, this community is proud and should be proud of their work. Presenting for Mr. Robert Lahue will be Craig Howry. Would you please come up and introduce our inductee? Thank you so much.
How close do I have to be to this? Is that working? Yeah. Good afternoon. I have the privilege today of introducing a man I have known since 1962 when we were in the same kindergarten class together. My memories of those days are hazy at best, but photos still exist showing Bob and I going about the little activities that we had to do in kindergarten together. It turned out to be the beginning of a friendship that has lasted 54 years. During that time, I have not only valued him as a friend, I have come to admire and appreciate him. I can't actually tell you what Bob does for a living. He has, over the years, patiently tried to explain to me several times what his field is. But try as I might, I can't seem to wrap my brain around his job. I know he is an accomplished scientist, researcher, educator, and visionary. I just can't tell you what he does. But I can tell you the kind of person Bob is. He is focused and unflappable. I have yet to see him speechless. He's an athlete, playing football, basketball, and running track in high school. He skis, loves the outdoors, and is a fierce competitor. In the past, when he had friends over at his house, he organized cutthroat croquet games. As none of the guests actually knew the rules, we relied on Bob's expertise, and that may be why I don't ever remember winning one of those games. Bob is generous and considerate. Even now, living in Ireland, he still takes time to send me a happy birthday greeting each year. During the years I lived out of state, Bob made a point to visit my late mother when he was in Hamilton. And I was deeply honored some 36 years ago to serve as best man at his wedding. Bob and his gracious wife Elaine made room in their lives and adopted two beautiful daughters, Rita and Kira. Bob may seem reserved, but he shares great limericks and horrible puns. Bob has achieved a great deal of success in his life, academically, professionally, and personally. It comes as no surprise to those of us who grew up with him. But each time we get together, no matter how long it has been, Bob is the same guy I knew in high school so many years ago. Friendly, warm, considerate, modest, self-deprecating, funny, and sincere. We are both a great deal older now, but believe me when I say Bob hasn't changed a bit. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor to present to you a very good friend, Professor Robert Lakey.
Well, thank you, Craig. You're a tough act to follow. I'd love to start by thanking very much the Hall of Honor committee for the privilege of being here. It's a real thrill to be back, and I love being back in school and seeing how well it's held up over the years. So well done to all the teachers, administrators, and the Emerald Foundation for keeping the level of the school and the education so high. So it's a real thrill to be back visiting the school. As Craig mentioned, I now live in Ireland. So there's a bit of symmetry here. I'm visiting from the Emerald Isle. Sorry, fun here. But it really is lovely to be back, and I always enjoy my trips here. So I guess what I was thinking about from being an educator and a scientist was how you go about explaining to people what you do. And I've tried with Craig that some things are hopeless. What can I say? But really, it's a matter of what I call lifelong learning. So I don't think it's so much as teaching other people as learning from them as much as they learn from me. And one of my role models was a friend of my parents named Russell Hill. And Russell Hill was perhaps the most interesting man I ever met because he was interested in lots of things. He was engaging. He could talk to anybody about anything because he knew something about virtually everything. And so one of my goals in life is to try and emulate Russell and be that way myself. So where do these sources of lifelong learning come from? Well, some of them come from friends, of course, lifelong friends, Craig, and Beth, and all my classmates in the audience, for teaching me what really, the joy of committing and staying together all these years. So thank you to them. To my family, of course, my sister Sandy, who taught me to read, my brother Ellen, who taught me what noogies are, my mom and dad for teaching me that learning is an opportunity not to be wasted, and to my wife Elaine and my daughters, teaching me perhaps the most important lessons of being a husband and a father. My teachers, of course, Dick Lenhard, Gary Ryder, Dick Carroll, and all the others in science, particularly Bill Orchid in biology, Bob Bond in chemistry, and Jim Andrews in math. Thanks to you for all the things you taught me. One of the problems of being a friend of Craig's is sitting next to him in class. Our chemistry teacher was named Bob Bond, and one day Craig was doodling instead of paying attention, and I looked over and he had drawn this picture of Mr. Bond drowning in the ocean and being thrown a life rope by something that looked like the outline of the U.S., and Craig had written underneath U.S. Savings Bonds. So I'm not the only punster in the group. Also, my coaches, again, Dick Lenhard, Dick Carroll, Gary Ryder, for teaching me about the thrill of being part of a team and of competing. Especially all those days, Saturday afternoon basketball with the junior leagues. And it really paid off because I was able to play several sports in high school, including basketball. And I won't mention the fact that there was one year our 12-man squad only had 11 people try out. So I keep telling my daughter sometimes showing up is half the battle, and there's a good example. So I'm still learning things every day. Some of those might be senior moments. I'm getting to that age as well. But I still learn things every day, and I hope to act like and be like Russell Hill for the rest of my life. So I just maybe mention a few things about my accomplishments since leaving Hamilton. So I'm class of 75, same as my classmate Nathan and Craig. And after leaving here, I went to college at the University of Virginia studying chemistry, and then went on to earn a PhD in biochemistry. So I'm technically a doctor, but I am not the kind of doctor that can help anybody. There's an MD if anyone's not feeling well, talk to that. To me. After finishing my PhD, I went to work at Duke Medical Center, where it was my privilege to work for a fellow named Paul Modrich. And just, excuse me, just this last December, Paul Modrich was honored by the Nobel Committee as a laureate in chemistry. And I got to go to the ceremony as a guest and dressed up in a white tie, and that was an excruciating experience, but nonetheless, I do have photos of it. But I got to see my former boss be awarded the highest honor in science. His discovery was, among all, a very basic thing. The discovery that every cell in our body has a genetic spell checker. So just like we use spell checkers in our documents and our texts to make sure we don't goof up, our cells have spell checkers to make sure the DNA is properly maintained. And that simple discovery, that simple idea, led to sharing in the Nobel Prize. So that was part of my contribution. So since leaving Duke, and I had a couple academic posts in the US, and then moved to Ireland 9 years ago. And in more recent years, we've studied a different problem, not a genetic spell checker so much, as a genetic disease called Huntington's disease. So you may have heard of Woody Guthrie, the folk singer who wrote This Land Is Your Land and many other songs. He passed away from Huntington's disease. It's an inherited disease with no cure. And we've been studying this from a basic science mechanism, trying to understand how it works. And I'm glad to report that just recently we had our first successful test in mice, only in mice, of something that seems to delay or at least prevent the disease. So there's some hope perhaps for these families and patients who are afflicted by this inherited disease, that there may be some hope in the future. So we have to work really hard to follow up on that. But I'm glad to report that so far so good. So coming back then to Hamilton, all the things it taught me to get along with people. In some cases, you're stuck with them for the rest of your life. It taught me to take advantage of the opportunities in music and sports and all the other things that there is to do. And it also taught me to keep a sense of humor, including, for example, the last point, an obituary of all things I read in the paper recently from a lady who, from Richmond, Virginia, and her official obituary in the Richmond Times-Dispatch talked about how this lady had been faced with the choice of voting for either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, and instead she went to meet her God on May 15th of this year. So there's always a way out and always a sense of humor. So with that, again, my sincere thanks to all of you and to the committee and for being here. I can't think of a higher honor for myself. Thank you so much.
I also want to thank another special person here. About a year ago, almost to the day, when I came to my first Hall of Honor induction, I asked, where's the camera? Why are we not videotaping this? This is important. And this year we contacted BOCES, and they gave us a very fancy camera, and only to realize that we don't have a camera person on staff. So this fine little 12-year-old, who 2 days ago was down in Quad going to graduation pool parties, my daughter Rebecca is the camera woman for today. Our next inductee will be introduced by Gary Ryder, who will introduce Mr. Richard Cowell. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you to the committee for 3 outstanding selections for the Hamilton Central School Hall of Honor. And I have had the honor of teaching 2 of the candidates and the honor of a dear friendship with the 3rd. I'm going to speak about Dick Carroll in 3 different personas. Dick as an athlete, as a teacher coach, and as a friend and colleague. Dick played for the Iona College basketball team, and I can personally attest to his skills on the court, as I usually guarded him in our battles during Saturday hoops back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. He could shoot and rebound, and his passing was legendary. If you were on his side, you better be ready, because from out of nowhere, the ball was suddenly in your hands. Speaking of Saturday hoops, Dick Carroll and Dick Lenhart for years ran the Saturday basketball program under the auspices of the Village of Hamilton Winter Recreation Program. The adult hour, 11 to noon, featured many classic matchups, and at the end of the year, Dick Carroll and Dick Lenhart would hold an awards ceremony with the awarding of collected but abandoned tennis and bowling trophies. The awards were, of course, silly, but very entertaining. The most coveted award, so I've heard, was most average. Won once by Dana Chapman, I believe. As did I, Dick loved the game of golf. He won the Seven Oaks Club Championship in 2 years, in 1985 and again in 1990. We both played with a group called the Dew Sweepers early in the morning. One legendary character in that group was Joe Shaheen, who was noted for playing golf for 199 consecutive days in 1 year. Joe was not a great golfer, but he was a natural entertainer. After a fellow player would take a shot, invariably Joe would shout out a remark. Example, if you hit the ball weakly to the right, he would say, right down the middle on the right side. If you hit the ball nicely down the fairway, he would say, nice swing, you must not have worked as a kid. If he himself hit a good shot, he would say, attaboy, Joe, or not bad for a man with one wife and one business. On another occasion, he would proclaim, I'm a 3 handicap. I'm Lebanese, I'm Catholic, and I'm from East Utica. He referred to any new player joining us as fresh meat because he would be subjected to all of Joe's sayings for the first time. What does all this have to do with Dick Carroll? Well, one day I innocently said, you know, somebody should write down all these sayings and number them so that we could just shout out a number and not even have to go through the sayings. Well, guess what? Dick went home and began cataloging all those expressions and came up with, gotta find it here, the collected wit and wisdom of Joe Shaheen. 45 different sayings that Joe would complete, he would use in one single round of golf. At the end of the school year back in those days, the Center State Conference staged a golf tournament for all the coaches of the league. It was held at many different golf courses over the years, and the Hamilton contingent was by far the largest of all the schools. We would have anywhere from 15 to 18 coaches at these outings, and other schools would send 4 or 5. Many of our coaches were not really skilled golfers, which was a great opportunity for Dick to create. He began to write an annual newsletter to commemorate and enliven the event. He spent an inordinate amount of time, not school time, on it, and it became highly anticipated. He would collect dozens of golf jokes, comic strips, and cartoons during the year to accompany this really amazing creation of awards and write-ups. For at least 21 years he did this. It was called the Flog Newsletter. That's golf spelled backwards. Let me just give you a quick sampling. I have 3 copies, the 17th anniversary Flog Newsletter, the 20th anniversary, and the 21st. And I'm not going to read from inside. I'll be glad to share these with you after the ceremony. But here's the 17th anniversary commemorative edition, the Flog Newsletter, the official publication of the HCS Hazard Huggers and Barley Salivation Association. And there's a cartoon in the middle, which is really funny, but I won't bother you with that right now. But down at the bottom, there's a quote. Quote, and as for Cedar Lake, that's a golf course, it was the best of nines, it was the worst of nines. And that's taken from Chuck Dickens, assistant pro with the Literary Society. Here's another one. This is the 20th anniversary. It's a log newsletter. HCS Bunker and Brew Dilettante Duffer Society. And down at the bottom, the quote, famous quote, hey, Aaron Burr, what you say we shoot around? That's by Al Shaky Hands Hamilton, assistant pro, the links at Dueling Pistols Ridge. Some examples of Dick's humor. Dick Carroll loved his job. As a colleague of ours remarked, he seemed most comfortable in this building, preparing and teaching and enjoying his students and colleagues. He was a very bright, very prepared teacher, and in his classroom, his unique sense of humor held sway. An example. One day, a PE instructor named Tom Blackford, remember him? Was leading a class cross-country skiing around the building when they stopped beneath Dick's second floor class. Soon the snowballs were getting the classroom window. And before they skied up, Dick immediately gathered his class outside and hid behind a doorway, and when Blackford's group came back around again, retaliation. Another example. A student well known for missing school on scheduled history exam days. Sure enough, let's call him Thomas. Thomas skipped such a day, but Dick is ready for this. The next day, Thomas comes to class, and Dick explains that due to the fire drill the day before, the test is being given today. Dick hands out a fake test on which all the students, except of course Thomas, have been coached. The test is impossibly obtuse and with imposing and indiscernible graphs and charts and instructions to the class on which items they were permitted to use their slide rules or compasses. The class dutifully works on the exam as Thomas looks on in bewildering panic. Point made? Undeniably. What do you expect from a teacher whose three favorite movies were Spinal Tap, Dr. Strangelove, and anything with Monty Python? I don't want to give the impression that it was all play and no work in his classes. There was plenty of serious study, but it's a lot more fun to talk about the lighter moments. As a coach, Dick contributed much, but in relative obscurity. Junior high track coaches and assistant golf coaches just don't get many headlines. And that was fine with Dick. He never sought the headlines. He was content with working one-on-one with budding track athletes and golfers and took pleasure in their improvement. Dick, Marion Blaine, and I worked summers for 30 years in offering junior golf instruction at Seven Oaks. It paid off for our Hamilton Central School golf program. Most, if not all, of our golfers came up through junior golf at Seven Oaks, and even today, these golfers, now adults, most of them, will confirm that their interest in golf was nourished and developed by Dick Carroll. Dick Carroll retired in 1997. His retirement was full. He and Betty traveled the world over. He loved music, mostly classical, including opera, but also jazz. For his entire life, he devoured the New York Times daily. He was a trustee of the Hamilton Public Library. Oh, the dreaded moment of getting lost with sheets of paper. Well, I'm going to just wing it here. I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'd like to have a moment of silence in remembrance of Dick, because he just passed away not too long ago. His family couldn't be here for this presentation because they just turned around and had to go back home across the country. So a moment of silence, please. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to present the trophy or the plaque for the Hamilton Hall of Fame to Dick Carroll posthumously, and I'll be the one to accept it for him. Thank you.
Adjunct to this wonderful presentation that Gary just gave us. It should be noted also that Dick was very helpful in the Hall of Honor Committee, and he used to attend a lot of our meetings and help us gather information about the people that were being inducted, contact them, etc. He took a real interest in this, and he will be missed on our committee as well.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I think just listening to the work of Richard Carroll, it made me reflect on the current atmosphere around public education. And I think hearing stories like that gives not only me hope, but gives this country, should give this country hope that not only do we have outstanding teachers, we have people with talent who are deeply committed to what they do. And I am just honored to be in a community that values and understands the power of a really good teacher. So thank you for that so much, Gary. Right, I appreciate that. Moving forward, we have Karen Basso and Gail Jones presenting for, or introducing Beth Nelson. Thank you so much.
So thrilled that HCS is honoring our sister Beth today. When she comes up here to the lectern, she'll tell you a little bit about her life. But there are things she's way too humble to share with you, so we're going to tell you instead.
She's devoted countless hours to training for bike-a-thons to raise thousands of dollars to fight pediatric cancer and AIDS. She spent her vacations helping rebuild houses after Hurricane Katrina, and in Africa and the Dominican Republic serving as a medical missionary, and she used her own funds to do it. As a woman's reproductive cancer specialist, she's performed surgeries lasting 5, 10, even 12 hours, and she's saved thousands of lives. And when we walk into her house or her office, all the gifts and thank you cards from patients tell us that her commitment to healing does not end in the operating room.
But best of all, for us, throughout our lives, she's been here by our side when we need her the most. And we wish our parents were alive now to help us celebrate her induction into the Hall of Honor. Beth, we're so proud of you. We love you. And come on up here and give your speech.
Obviously, the two sisters, I had to ask both of them. Can you hear me okay? Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the committee for the honor of being inducted into the Hamilton Central School Hall of Honor, and also the people of Hamilton. You helped shape me.
and you've welcomed me and my family here today. Thank you. I really feel like it's my sisters, who are accomplished women in their own right, who ought to be honored today. But here I am. When asked for where I'm from, my answer is I grew up in a one traffic light town in upstate New York. I haven't been back in 30 years, so you've gotten a couple more traffic lights. That's always followed by, it's the home of Colgate University, and it was a great place to grow up. It's true, I feel just very blessed to have had a Hamilton childhood. My family has always been close. My parents, Gig and Dean Nelson, were very involved in town activities. Dad had his optometric office in our home at 9 Madison Street, and Mom worked as an optometric assistant for him before she went on to seminary and then served in several area churches as a pastor. My sisters, Karen and Gail, preceded me in Hamilton Central School. If you're wondering where 9 Madison Street is, it's a parking lot. Unfortunately, it burned to the ground in the 1980s. It was a beautiful, columned, big, white Greek Revival style home, and it still holds lots of memories for us. It was a little poignant to see the parking lot last night. My family was active in Park Methodist Church, town gown activities, and a lot of civic organizations, including the Planning and Zoning Board, Rotary, and so on. Encouraged by my parents and many other influential adults and teachers, growing up here meant that we really believed that every person mattered. I learned that it was important to listen to all opinions before making up my own mind, and I was taught to stick up for the underdog. That's gotten me into trouble later in life, but you're not going to hear about that. Our mom was especially outspoken, and she modeled for us how to stand up for our own beliefs. Because she knew my dad wouldn't necessarily approve, and she didn't want to embarrass him, she would sometimes sneak out the back door to picket. I remember her picketing when there was voting one day, and she would go to the sit-ins up at Colgate during the Vietnam era. So both parents really remained a sounding board for me throughout our lives. Much of my primary education was really centered on being different from my two older sisters. Sound familiar to anybody? I was dead set against playing violin, which they both did, and I took up flute. I played every sport I could, even without much natural aptitude. Most of my classmates were way better than I was, but like Bob said, if you were only looking for 12 people on a team and 10 people showed up, well, you got on the team. That was great. I guess I gravitated toward science and math rather than English again because my sisters looked at English more. I just tried to rebel against being another nice, quiet Nelson girl. However, despite the desire to be different, I still remember the shame I felt when in 3rd grade a teacher reprimanded me, I think maybe it was Mrs. Gallup, for talking out of turn by saying, "Nelson girls don't do that." I don't know if you guys ever heard anything like that. We were always encouraged by our parents that we could do anything we put our minds to, but we were also acutely aware of our dad's status in town as a professional man and the expectation that we would behave. We really felt we had to make our parents proud. Growing up in such a small town, I think we all really felt that every adult was keeping an eye on us, knew exactly who we were, and would certainly report any problems to our parents. A lot of the time, I think this was secretly kind of a comforting thing, but not always. I do very distinctly remember a time when my sister Karen and the Baptist minister's son, who I'm not going to name, rang the church bell late one Halloween night and wound up hiding in the baptismal pool when the police arrived. Our parents found out about it. I had my share of deviltry as well. Fortunately, I don't really remember this well, but somehow I became involved with a bunch of teenagers who decided that it would just be lots of fun to set off some bottle bombs in front of the high school on 4th of July night. Thank goodness nothing bad happened, but I remember all of us scattering to outrun the police cruiser. I don't think my parents ever found out about that. Times have really changed. When we were young, kids in Hamilton in the summer in the 60s were sent out of the house by our mothers to go find something to do, get out of my hair. We ranged all over town, all over surrounding towns by bike. The caveat was that we would come home at a certain time, We would head right home if we heard my dad's distinctive whistle, and then we would always carry that dime so that we could call home if we needed to get out of an uncomfortable situation. We grew up in town, and so we were walkers rather than taking the school bus. Our family had an agreement that we would get a ride to school when it was under 0 degrees. By the time I was in high school, the dress code had changed, but my sisters were required to wear skirts to school. So we were very grateful for that little family rule. I've always felt, and I still believe, that I received an outstanding education at Hamilton Central School. HCS certainly prepared me for a competitive college. The studying skills I used here, I learned here, I still use to keep up on the constant changes in the medical field. I came up with these teachers without realizing that Mr. Ryder was going to be here. So, thanks to Mrs. Merrick, I learned the rules of grammar. Mr. Ryder and other wonderful English teachers. Now you've got the woman mask, I'm going to be a little emotional. So Mr. Ryder and the other wonderful English teachers spurred my love of reading. I read all the time. Mr. Orchid spurred my fascination with biology. And there are lots of other teachers who are just, there are too many to name. My folks put 3 kids through college, and the deal was this. They would pay the equivalent of in-state tuition for 4 years. Above and beyond that, we needed to find a way to handle the rest of the finances. So it sure seemed like I would stay at a SUNY school. Imagine my delight when Bob Layhew told me about the University of Virginia, whose out-of-state tuition was the same as New York in-state. I got to leave New York, leave home. So I spent 2 years as a chemistry major at UVA, and then I decided to transfer to a women's college, Bryn Mawr, to finish my degree. Fortunately, since I had to work, my work-study placement involved working in the library so I could study while I worked most of the time. I remember back at UVA, Bob and I used to argue about whether an MD or a PhD was a real doctor. What do you think, Bob? I think we both are. I decided by the age of 6 that I wanted to be a doctor. The way that came about is the Time Life book series at that time had an issue about physicians, and I had always wanted to be a nurse, even at that age. But after reading the book, I saw, my goodness, girls can be doctors too. So that's how I decided to be a doctor. Obviously, I had no clue what was involved. And in retrospect, my laser focus on that goal meant that I missed out on a lot. You know, there's so many things I could have studied in school. I don't know world history. My only words in a foreign language relate to medicine. So I know how to ask if somebody's in pain, dolor. I know how to apologize, lo siento. I even know in some local Ghanaian dialects how to ask a person to take a deep breath. But I can't speak any language. Fortunately, I've come to realize that my gifts of healing, compassion, and listening are well suited for my field of gynecologic oncology. I take care of women with ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, uterine, and other cancers, and do their surgery. For a decision that I made at, such an immature stage, I'm really lucky that I seem to have been put on this earth to do this job. Thankfully, I'm persistent. My family might say stubborn, and I was able to learn to be a good surgeon as well. My training occurred at a time when women were becoming more and more accepted as physicians, yet I experienced my share of chauvinistic attitudes, as you can imagine. During my high school senior year internship, which I was so excited about, I spent a week at Mary Imogene Bassett Hospital in Cooperstown, and I observed many different doctors. These men, and yes, they were all men, uniformly discouraged my aspirations with the expected observation that you'll just get married, have kids, and drop out. Well, so there. My final 2 years in a women's college really confirmed my belief that gender didn't matter as much as intelligence and a good work ethic. I chose to go to a new medical school, SUNY Stony Brook, back to that in-state tuition. My small class there was over 50% female. The same was true in my medical residency, where several faculty were women. This included my mentor in gynecologic oncology, Dr. Dee Biegler, who was actually the first female GYN oncologist in the country. Big shoes to fill. GYN oncology at the time that I went into it was considered a macho specialty because we spent many, many hours in the operating room doing very radical surgeries. When I finished my training, fewer than 10% of GYN oncologists were women. We're now approaching 50%, so thankfully a lot has changed. I have a couple stories for you. During my medical internship, one of my first patients in July was just a very unpleasant man, and he insisted on calling me honey. So after putting up with this for several long, hot, irritating days, I finally stomped my way into the room and said, "You can call me that, but it's Dr. Honey." 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, 5 years of residency, and 3 years of fellowship. I went into practice 16 years after graduating from HCS. I think I earned the right to be called doctor. So even today, so chauvinism still exists. Even today, I'll usually spend an hour or more with a new cancer patient and her husband or partner. During that time, we discuss her diagnosis, we discuss the treatment options, and then we discuss an intricate surgery in great detail. Funny thing is, it's not uncommon at the end of that hour for one of them to ask, "And who will be doing the surgery, ma'am?" Oh boy, right? I've also been called Mrs. Nelson by patients more times than I can remember. But anyway, I just do my job. I've participated in a number of mission trips, both with my church and as a medical missionary. I'll always be able to have pictures in my brain of the people of Biloxi, Mississippi, telling their harrowing personal stories of surviving Katrina. Even as we returned on our 5th trip rehabbing those homes, which was more than 5 years after the hurricane, there were just so many homes that were uninhabitable, and I don't know if they're still there probably. Another mission memory is from Africa, and this is the day that the local chief visited my medical clinic in rural Ghana. He had prudently waited several days after our arrival because he wanted to be sure that the American doctor was okay. We were working in a 3-room clinic with no electricity, no running water, obviously no facilities, and several hundred people milled around outside in 100-degree heat. Most of them had walked miles to get to the clinic. Occasionally an entire family would pile onto a motorbike to get there. And we were providing general medical care for all ages, men and women, gynecologists here, men and women. And it was me, an American nurse, and a local nurse. So one day, midday, the local chief, dressed in his full tribal regalia, pulls up in a large black SUV with an entourage. All of his villagers stepped back. He went to the head of the line, accompanied by his sub-chiefs, all also in the tribal outfits. He entered my little tiny consultation room. Faced by this entourage, I gave a little bow, and suddenly all the sub-chiefs dropped to the floor. They prostrated themselves in front of their chief. So trying to be a professional doctor, I dealt with his high blood pressure. I gave him a little lecture about the dangers of smoking. I gave him some ibuprofen for the back pain that everybody had. And then he said, "I'm having trouble seeing." I may be the daughter of an optometrist, but I was completely unprepared to take care of an eye problem. Fortunately, one of our other travelers had packed a bunch of cheap eyeglasses, reading glasses from the dime store. And so I grabbed them, tried several pairs on them, and he found one he liked, and we parted with much bowing by both of us. Over the next few days, there was a run on eyeglasses in the clinic because everybody wanted to emulate their chief. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. After the failure of an early marriage, 13 years ago, I met Stanley Foley. I'm not going to look at him. We were both renovating old houses, and I needed a restoration mason. Who knew things got that specialized? Stan had managed to engage the services of a man who had the reputation of being the best old house mason in New England, and obviously I wanted this guy. A mutual friend put us in touch. Stanley invited me to come over and see his fireplaces. I never did hire that famous mason, but I wound up with something I treasure far more. said I wouldn't look her, my life partner. So, the highlights of my career are that I've trained several hundred OBGYN residents. I've cared for thousands of women who've allowed me to fight their cancer battle with them. I've used my skills, such as they are in foreign countries where medical care is rudimentary. I hope I've mostly done this with grace and joy. I give thanks that I was born into such a loving and loyal family, and that I've had the great good fortune to call Hamilton my hometown. Thank you again for this singular honor.
So much, Dr. Nelson. She earned it. I moved, and I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who participated today in our Hall of Honor induction ceremony. By recognizing the accomplishments of the inductees, we recognize the best in ourselves and the best in the potential that we have as individuals, but also of this community. It is said that the road to success is often uphill. I'd like to thank today's inductees for staying on that path uphill and choosing what M. Scott Peck would call the road less traveled. Thank you all for today's wonderful opportunity. Thank you, the press, for coming. And we will have refreshments in the cafeteria. Thank you for attending today.